Welcome to at CCLI. I'm Paul Herman, here today with worship leader, songwriter, and recording artist London Gatch.
Hi.
London, so good to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So if you could, tell us about your background and also your time with Elevation Worship.
Yes, well, so I don't even know where to start. I grew up a part of ministry. I'm actually a Jewish believer, a Messianic Jew.
Wow.
And so I have had a very fun upbringing. My parents were the founders and leaders of our Messianic congregation. And so I was always around ministry, and both my parents were worship leaders.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just kind of been in my DNA since the beginning.
Yeah. And those instruments and the Jewish dancing and everything.
Exactly,
Wow,
exactly.
cool.
But no, I love to tell people that my first volunteer role in ministry was actually the head of the parking team. I kind of was the parking team.
Yeah.
Because our synagogue started in our house. And so before the congregation was big enough to where we had to move into like an actual building. So my sister and I, we would wear those like reflective vests with the batons and park people on our street. So yeah, I just grew up in ministry, always felt like it was just something important that I needed to do and focus on. But I didn't really think that it was going to be like my main, focus in life. I mean, we're all called to worship, so obviously, always called to worship with the gifts that the Lord's given us. But it wasn't until I was in my like early mid-20s that I really felt like the Lord said, stop everything you're doing and really focus on leading worship. That's what I have for you. That's not a fallback plan. It's not a plan B. It's not just something that you were raised in. Like it's what I have for you. And so that's how I guess that's when I decided to listen to the Lord, which is always a good thing, yes. And really press into growing as a worship leader and just kind of saying like, Lord, I'm here. What do you have for me? Yeah. And my husband Lance and I, we were newlyweds, and we were serving at Seacoast Church in Charleston, which is actually where we are back home at Seacoast now.
Oh, nice.
But we were there and we were serving, and we knew that the Lord was telling us that we were going to be raised up in ministry, and that would probably look like being a part of a church staff, thinking that it was Seacoast at the time, but it ended up being Elevation for a period of 8 years, which was very exciting, like the most intense, crazy roller coaster ride.
Yes, right.
It's like worship boot camp.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we would never trade the friends that we made, the community that we had there, just the experience that we got. The church was really small when we joined the staff.
So you saw it explode.
We saw the good, the bad, the ugly, like the growing pains, the exciting, amazing moments. So yeah, it was such a great experience.
And all
for
those
us.
songs, I mean.
Oh yeah, I know.
Came out of there.
And being a part of just watching a church and a worship ministry just go from, super, super small, praying, believing that God's going to do something exciting, and then, realizing that the songs that you get to be a part of are being sung all over the world is very humbling, and it was a great experience. But we got pregnant with my first baby. I'm actually 8 months pregnant with our second. So if anyone sees my Santa Claus belly. But when we decided to start a family, got pregnant with our first daughter, and just felt like the Lord was calling us into something new. And I was kind of like, well, yeah, motherhood, that's new. Well, of course.
Right.
But it ended up actually being that he was asking us to just step away, take a step back from Elevation entirely. And so it was really, really hard decision. When you're a part of a ministry that long,
Yes.
it becomes a part of you. It's, your identity almost. Yeah. And so for us it was a lot of trust, a lot of faith, believing that if God was going to bring us into something like this, that if he's calling us away, we just have to have faith, and we have to lay it all down at his feet and say, God, I trust you. You gave us this in the first place. If it's time for us to step away, then we want what you have, waiting for us on the other side.
Right.
And I'm really, really glad that we did, because the last few years have been just some of the most exciting times of like rest and creativity and peace. Becoming a mom. We moved back home to Charleston. We're plugged back into Seacoast, the church where we met, the church where we fell in love, got married, all that good stuff. So yeah, it's been a really exciting few years for us.
Now you're back to recording and writing.
Yes, yes.
So a song I wanted to ask you about, Jesus Only You.
Yes.
Tell us about that one.
Wow. So when we stepped away from Elevation, honestly, we knew that we still felt called to write songs for the church, but we didn't know what that would look like.
Yeah.
We were, like I said, we were about to have our first child. We were moving. We had, just a lot going on, but we were just trusting, God, even if we're writing for a small group that meets in our living room, or our church, our local church, or on a bigger scale, whatever it is, we know that we're still feeling called to write songs for the church. And so Jesus Only You was actually written just a couple months after my daughter was born. And before we even partnered with BEC Worship, before we even knew that we were making a record, it was honestly just like the cry of my heart. Like I knew that I needed to express these words in worship out loud to the Lord. I actually woke up one morning and it was one of those things where it's like you're hearing something in your head and you can't get your phone fast enough.
Right.
And so I just couldn't stop singing or saying, only you can make it right again. Only you can make me whole again. Just over and over again. Yeah. So I jotted that down in my notes and I just knew I needed to express that to the Lord in worship. And so a few weeks later, we were writing with some friends, Jesse Reeves and Aaron Robertson. And Jesus Only You came out of just a really beautiful time of writing and worship. And honestly, I feel like it perfectly sums up just the transition that we had gone through, just crying out to the Lord for healing. I mean, when you step away from a community and you step away from something like that, it's hard in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Not everyone gets the memo that you're supposed to step away. So it's like not everyone is happy about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just really hard and painful and testing and all of the different ways to describe it. But the song is just a declaration coming out of Psalm 8. Lord, how majestic is your name. Your glory is higher than the heavens. So that song is basically saying, God, you're higher than the heavens, but you're still small enough to see my every need, to know my every hurt. I can find healing in your presence. You're the one that I run to, Jesus Only You. Even though you're the God of the universe, you still are close enough to be near me and comfort me.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
Yeah.
You have another song called New Stories. Yes. I'm guessing there's a story behind it.
There is. So New Stories, gosh. New Stories was a little further into the songwriting process for the album, and I'm so happy, of course, that it came about because the minute it was written, we said this has to be our title track. This this encompasses everything that our past and our future colliding. God, we believe that when we transitioned out of the season that we were in for almost a decade, we believe that our story isn't over. You're not done with us. We believe you're going to give us new stories. And then just, believing that there are so many new stories to come. So the story behind it is, I feel like we're saying the word story a million times. So the story behind New Stories is we'd been plugged back into Seacoast, a part of the church, and just such a great church family. And some of us on the worship team and a few others, we were all realizing that we were very hungry for the same thing. Digging deeper in the gifts of the Spirit, more awareness of God's presence. How do we experience more of heaven on earth is basically what, we were like little kids, like giddy little kids, like, God, we want more of your presence. And so one of our worship pastors, he assembled a few of us in his living room, he and his wife, and we were going around the room in this living room, just saying what we were believing God could do, what he was speaking to us. And I'll never forget my husband, Lance, he said, I'm tired of living just off of the old stories of what I've seen God do in my life. I believe he's going to give us new stories. And it was kind of, that tie-in to the transition that we had just made. So believing that our story isn't over. God, you're going to give us new stories. And not just in our family, but new stories in our church, new stories in our community. And so there was really something special ignited in the room that night. When he said that, it was almost like everyone was, our hearts all agreed at the same time, And we had such a powerful time of prayer and worship in that living room that night. And part of that song started to flow out of a few of us as we were leading worship. My husband and I, ended up writing this song with a great friend of ours, Brandon Lake, who also is a worship leader at Seacoast. And and after the night was over, a few of us, we just said, let's finish this song.
Yes.
Because it not only is the cry of our heart, but it also is, a testament to what God did that night. He did something really powerful. And honestly, our church has experienced some amazing revival in the last year. So it's been really interesting and exciting and cool to see how God can take the faith of a few people meeting in a living room and allow us to see some of that come to fruition.
Yes.
And so,
And
so he is giving us new stories at our church.
And then all the new stories to come.
Yes, exactly.
Amazing.
Yes.
Any final thoughts at all for our worship leaders and worship teams out there?
I would just say, in the presence of our God, anything can happen. to quote the chorus of New Stories, we are in such a season of believing that if you will just lay down the control and leave room for the Holy Spirit, it is amazing what the Lord can do, how he can show up in your church, in your heart, in your family. We are experiencing some radical miracles in our church right now. And I honestly believe that revival is breaking out all across our country. I know all over the world, but I believe something really special is happening right now in our country. And I'm just excited for this generation of worship leaders to lead the charge, you know? So I would just say, let's believe that God can do anything, that when we ask him for it, when we come into his presence with open hands, that really he can do. He is the God who can do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. And so we truly believe that, and we're excited to see what he's going to do.
Amazing. London, this has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for watching. Take care.